Hello everybody, welcome to Let's Play Combat Mission Barbarossa Berlin. So this is the second episode to scenario Directive number 3. Directive number 3 actually was, I searched on Google, was actually the counterattack order given to the generals and officers manning the southern front for the Russians or Soviet Union. And it was an order that not only said to counterattack the invading German forces, but also to go as far as some Polish city in their efforts. And a lot of the officers, a majority of officers, thought that it was practically impossible. And I think one of the officers, prominent guys who was involved in this particular battlefield was Karponos. And he definitely wasn't too keen in following the orders and was able to ready his men enough that the Germans encountered the most resistance in this part of the front. And I'm trying to, right now, as you can see by my mouse pointer, I recorded this in advance. And I definitely made the right decision, I think. I'm doing this just trying to give you an idea where the tanks might end up in the second phase of the battle. Yeah, I'm trying to reverse these tanks to combine the power of the armored presence there, because I think that more and more armor will appear. So just bunch up the tanks as much as possible to resist them with combined power. And here in the factory floors, yeah, we have a lot of men here. Yeah, a lot of men still advancing through the, well, I mean, plowing through the factory floors, excuse the pun. But yeah, I'm trying to use the manpower advantage in order to dominate the Germans out of this factory and get the first objective. That's the main priority for us. And Germans have been pretty tough. They've been pretty tough. We just started battling them in the factory, but in order to make sure that we get the best chance here, just bringing up the tanks from the rear to help with the infantry support, and so the line of sight might be able to shoot inside the factory from outside. And also from the west too, we are bringing the tanks in across the soft ground so that we might have more mobility if needs be against the factory. Here, as you can see, yeah, I'm bringing the tanks together in order to combine the strengths. I don't know whether that was a good idea in the end. And even all the other guys are trying to spot whatever is actually hanging back there, because the German armored cars usually come first as a recon duty. They're just trying to see and skirmish a few frontline troops and gather information about what the rest of the forces will face. And here, yeah, a lot of advance orders still advancing. Some of them are tired but just have to advance to the other side of the factory in order to fully clear the Germans. So I'm giving them advance orders once again through the rubble. Yeah, some very pitched fight going on. Some of the Germans are trying to run away, but they're running into more Russians. That's not really good for them. Here, the guns, yeah, a gun is actually hit on this tank, but still able to fire, thankfully. And this tank has been hit like multiple times. The German armored car is very accurate in its targeting. And finally, we are able to hit this car enough that it renders useless. So the hit gun, maybe crooked gun, is able to actually hit with more accuracy than the original gun is able to. That's pretty funny. But unfortunately there's another car right behind it, so the battle is won, but still it's not much of a, I don't know, it's a victory, but very small victory. There's more to come, and I don't know whether we get as good a chance to hit the German armored car anymore, because that was probably a lucky shot from us. Yeah, we are also getting hit from that German car way farther back, so that's like 600 meters instead of 500 meters. It was before. And I'm kind of suspecting now that, yeah, 624 meters, I'm kind of suspecting that these guys are basically crack shots, experienced guys, maybe from battles in Poland or France, and these guys we have in BT-7s, although BT-7s are pretty mobile tanks, well armored, I guess, going up against smaller armored vehicles from the German side. It's not really a tank that can measure up to German tanks such as Mark 4s or even Stuk 3s, so I'm getting a bit anxious here. I'm trying to bring the tanks from the west as quick as possible to maybe a strength from the west, showed it by the factory buildings. But you need to be very meticulous about the positions and the timing, because it's really difficult if you have green troops and green tankers. They take a lot more time before the order gets heard and performed upon. So if you give an order, it takes probably 20 to even as long as a minute before the order takes hold. And I didn't realize that before, so now if I'm playing the Russians, especially from 1941, maybe to 1942, need to be very careful. But here, infantry, the regular experienced infantry is able to find out these Germans from the rubble and is basically beating them, just hounding them, and routing them and eliminating them in very quick order. So the infantry is basically beyond reproach right now. They're performing very, very... oh my goodness, yeah, the track was hit. As you can see, the German tank is not able to really penetrate the frontal armor. And the problem is the track is immobilized, and then the Russian tankers get cold feet right away. In the last scenario I played, the German tankers were immobilized, but they're experienced enough to actually still fire their guns. But here is a different story. They just bail out right away because, you know, they're scared, I guess. They don't have the will to fight. So that's an unfortunate loss for us. I mean, that tank is still able to fire, and I mean, can be used as an impromptu or artillery gun or something, but yeah, T-34 is actually firing right now. Each gun is able to knock out the Panzer III. It looks like Panzer IV, but you know, it can also knock out Panzer IV if it lands an accurate shot. But unfortunately, it is inexperienced. It's actually conscript level, so it doesn't really hit the tanks at all, while the German tankers not only bring an accurate shot, but is also able to fire twice as fast. So that's a problem for us, and I'm giving the reverse order. The reverse order, I don't know whether you caught it, but it takes around 20 to 30 seconds before it takes hold. Not going to really be effective command at all. The most practical command is just fight. Fight where you are, just man up and fight. Yeah, hunker down and yeah, see to the result of the fight, whether you destroy the enemy or be destroyed. So that's probably the end result for a lot of the German or Russian tankers here in this case. The Russian infantry right now is advancing to the edge of the rubble, trying to see the full view of the factory floors, and getting also the advantage of the rubble in terms of the cover that it offers. But you can see that there's actually German poking through the factory floor from the east. So they have some guys right now trying to infiltrate the factory from the east. So you might have to move the infantry from the west to the train tracks. The tanks are still trying to go to the west side, toward the open side of the factory, to help the infantry to provide support. And that T-34 has been knocked down, unfortunately. The Panzer IV has landed an accurate shot, finally. It really didn't take them long. The BT-7 is still surviving, but its internal armor is flaking, which means it's not able to withstand a lot more punishment. Yeah, it's been able to withstand around 20 to 30 shots already, so I mean, it has been very lucky so far. And it's hold on position, mind you, but it's really asking for trouble. I mean, its luck is going to run out. But yeah, these infantry soldiers are valiantly opposing the Germans while advancing toward the rest of the factory floor. And now this guy is caught in a crossfire. Yeah, 6 units firing its guns and grenades. And the Germans are actually also very well armed with grenades. They're throwing potato mashers. So it's really pitched fight inside the factory, but things are not going well and not boding well for the tankers outside of the factory. So it's a tale of two battles. Armored car is able to land accurate shots 700 meters out now. And comparing the stats here, I mean, you can definitely see this is Panzer 4, not 3, but even Panzer 3 is able to outclass the BT-7s. T-34 fare a bit better, but it is manned by an experienced crew who might just abandon the tank with, yeah, you might be just shaken with first shot ricocheting off. And finally, the troops from the west, reserves, are making its move toward the factory, trying to really flush the Germans out before the armor does more damage. We have identified more German units inside the factory, and I think we'll find even more as we go through the rest of the factory floor, peek out of the rubble. And here I'm trying to go into more recessed areas, but this tanker is actually not filling up to it and trying to reverse, and finally it gets blasted. Nobody's getting out of that tank, unfortunately. Yeah, it was moving. It was moving tank, and it was around 500 to 600 meters out, but then Panzer IV is able to land an accurate shot. So I'm getting scared here. I'm getting really scared. Trying to decide whether to move all of these tanks away from the battlefield, or I don't know, away from the line of sight from the glut of German tanks that are now appearing. And that you've seen the German MG nest on the floor of the factory, rather exposed. And it's getting now blasted with the grenades and all that, but still able to fire on all that suppression. Finally, it is suppressed. Panzer IV is now engaging the BT-7. It's really no contest, but the BT-7 is still making a game out of it. And that is another ominous sign, German artillery landing, where they're close to our western troops, now advancing toward the train tracks. It's a bit ominous first salvo. So this is turn 15. Yeah, a lot of crisscross lines, a lot of battles happening inside the factory and outside the factory. And I'm also trying to move the tanks from the west in order to close the distance to the factory while being shielded by the buildings. But you will soon see how that is the most glaring and critical mistake I have made in this episode. So I'm trying to give the reverse order for the tank, but it's not going to really hold until after 20 seconds have passed. And I don't think that 20 seconds is enough for that to survive the tank battle with Panzer IV, possibly experienced Panzer IV. This MG is still suppressed. We really need to get it suppressed because we cannot really bring the MG to bear upon the infantry. So this tank's still firing, but unfortunately was knocked out finally. Yeah, and you can see from the back more and more main battle tanks are appearing. So this is probably not going to work out on our east flank. We need to probably regroup around the factory and trying to ambush them using the angles to our advantage, but it's kind of hard to give them orders and then allow them to follow those orders. I don't know why there's so much pause, possibly because Russian tanks are not equipped with radio and they're inexperienced. And there are only 3 crews in the tank, so I mean, multitasking in these kind of tanks probably take a lot of toll. Another tank knocked out. Surprisingly, these tanks, really, I'm talking about multitasking, and there's so many things that are happening here, I'm sorry, but yeah, German artillery is landing in the factory now, raking most of the Soviet troops on the eastern part of the factory. And some of them probably are routed, their spirits broken. Yeah, but then Russian tanks, some of them are hit without even recognizing that there is a Panzer IV in front of it gunning for it. So I think the multitasking part of it is taking its toll because there is really no way for the Russian tanks able to view the battlefield in a way that is able to, alert them to imminent danger when they're actually actively shooting at a different target. So as you can see, it was shooting at an infantry near the factory, trying to enter the factory. But on the other side, maybe they're 11 o'clock or so, in front of them, a Panzer IV was firing at it and was knocked out because it was not able to react quickly enough. Sometimes it does, but most of the times it just gets knocked out, unfortunately. So yeah, more fighting, and the tanks from the west side are trying to close the distance. And you can hear that there was another tank being knocked out or targeted, and then the shot landed. More troubling is that, yeah, these tanks are now getting hit from the space between the buildings. I thought that these guys were supposed to be shielded, but I was wrong. And these guys are backing up, and I don't know whether it was, yeah, it's basically gone. It was routed. So even though the tank is still serviceable and still able to shoot MGs, act as some kind of an MG platform, but yeah, it was routed, so they're not going to fight at all. They're going to just be rendered inactive. And another tank, BT-7, knocked out. So 2 tanks knocked out in short order by the German tanks. And now we know that the confirmed kill there, confirmed shot. And then the rest, the last BT-7 knows that something's afoot and trying to go away, retreat from the field, but I think it's a bit too late. And another tank probably knocked out there. I didn't really catch all of it because I'm distracted by all this artillery fire now, routing our infantry inside the factory itself. So on all fronts, we are basically driven back. Yeah, routed. This troop is routed. All the troops now running in the opposite direction of the Germans, now routed. Their spirits broken. Probably lost a lot of troops as well. Very accurate shot from the Germans, targeting the open spaces in the factory floor. Yeah, taking cover. He lost, yeah, 2 out of its 3 men in the squadron. This guy lost a lot of troops, routed, panicked. Panicked troops cannot do anything. They're pinned. And their ammo's getting low, and some of them have been eliminated. I think that was actually Germans, but yeah, I mean, they're not really in a good place. So, and these tanks, most of them have been hit. Some of them survived the first few shots. And then you can see that the pause command there, it takes around 65 seconds before it takes hold. Which means that, yeah, we are basically sitting ducks while trying to battle these guys. And it was my fault there. It was my fault. I should have brought my tanks even closer to that gap. I really didn't see the gap between the buildings being so advantageous for the Germans to spot our tanks like that. I mean, it probably helped them as a landmark to get their guns calibrated. And I really shouldn't have done that. I really should have moved the tanks in a roundabout way in order to support the rest of the BT-7s moving toward the factory, but I wasn't able to. And the German squadrons still are being eliminated by the erstwhile Soviet troops, still battling them amidst all the firestorm being thrown by the Germans in our artillery fire. Yeah, it's getting a bit... Yeah, these guys are getting a bit too thin. So that's why I'm bringing the troops from the west. And this German guy in the second floor is being hit right now. I think probably one of the last defenders on this side of the factory. And you can see that we have done enough. Oh my goodness, yeah, this tank is actually going up the hill, scattered tree. I didn't really realize this was possible. If I knew that before, I could have done some interesting things with the terrain, but yeah, he's getting hit while being in the scattered trees. So you can definitely tell how experienced and how skilled the German tankers are. He's able to hit with no problems the moving target, now being secluded. But yeah, I mean, we did enough in the factory to claim the objective now for Soviet Union. But things are rather thin and hanging in the balance. And you can see the casualties, all the knocked out tanks. I mean, those tanks I understand. I mean, they're firing, actively engaging the tanks, but here, this is just not good at all. I mean, this is just sorry sight. Definitely should have brought the tanks, you know, in a southern direction in order to support the tanks right now, hunting for the infantry inside the factory. I was a bit too rash in giving them orders to just move eastward toward the gap. The German tanks were able to bring their guns like that. Yeah, I mean, you can definitely see it. Yeah, this tank is trying, you know, it's all its might in order to escape, but it finally knocked out. German tanks, German panzers mean business, and they're definitely bringing the hurt. Their artillery is still falling. They're definitely stopping our offensive hold. We're just all pinned, and this guy finally got the idea to retreat, and he's able to survive in the last moment before also hit. That was pretty close call. The artillery shot landed, but I think it rendered one of the tanks obsolete or immobile. And this tank, I'm talking about these tanks, yeah, I mean, it wasn't able to see the Panzer IV gunning for it. It was distracted by the infantry and didn't see the Panzer that is gunning for it between the gaps. And here, I don't know what they're doing, but it kind of signifies how adrift we are right now, condition that a lot of our units find themselves in. It's kind of meandering in aimlessness and hopelessness as the German tanks are basically gunning for us and bearing down upon us. But the infantry reinforcements have arrived from the west, and they are now advancing after a few turns of embattlement. They are advancing and possibly human wave. I didn't give them order to human wave, but this is basically similar to the wave. Yeah, they're rushing headlong into enemy fire. Thankfully the German artillery has stopped, but it probably took away half of our infantry strength, fighting strength in the factory. It was a well-timed and very accurate shot. Thankfully, once again the tanks are regrouping around the factory, so no more casualties on the armor side. We have definitely seen and tasted the might of the German tank forces, so we are trying to regroup and then maybe ambush the tanks as they round the corner or something. I don't know how piecemeal is going to be like. Yeah, finally we are advancing. The Soviet troops never give up. They find the German troop. They still have grenades to throw, although their ammo is kind of getting low. Wow, yeah, the Germans not giving up. They're really, they seem to be grizzled veterans themselves, a lot of experience. They are exposed on the factory floor, but they can still hold their own against the encroaching Soviet troops in rubble, a lot of cover. We took the factory back, but I don't know how long that's going to last. Seesaw battle could have gone a lot better if I was able to save the tanks from being wasted in the early part of this episode. And the German counterattack is happening. Yeah, they've seen the Soviet flag on top of the factory. They cannot have that. They can have none of it. And they're rushing headlong in some kind of a human wave. I don't know how I should term it. The Teutonic wave now enveloping the Soviet soldiers and their dwindling ammo supply. They still have grenades to throw. And even the officers are joining in with their clinkers, their pistols. There's some very pitched battle happening right now. Yeah, we took one guy down. My goodness. What a disaster this episode has been, but it's a learning experience. Gotta be very careful with the tanks. Yeah, we're getting close to another German target here. You can see through the rubble. So that has been the second episode. Very interesting episode here where probably 80% of our tank force is wasted. Please wait for the third episode. Perhaps I can make something out of this and then buy for the factory all the same. If I get the factory, it's going to be considered a win in this case. So I hope you enjoyed this episode once again. Thank you for watching, and the next time, please stay tuned.